What if the way you've been brushing your teeth since childhood, the exact same motion, the exact same pressure, the exact same routine you've repeated twice a day for decades, is actually working against your gums, your enamel, and your long-term dental health after 50? Most people assume brushing technique is something you master as a child and never need to think about again. Brush, spit, rinse, done. But your mouth after 50 is genuinely different from the mouth you had at 20 or 30, and a brushing technique that caused no visible harm for decades can begin producing real, measurable damage once your gums, enamel, and jawbone have gone through the natural changes that come with age. So today we're going to walk through the specific brushing mistakes so common after 50 that most people don't even realize they're making, why these particular mistakes matter more now than they did in earlier decades, and exactly how to correct your technique starting with your very next brushing session. Before we begin, remember this video is for education only. If you're experiencing bleeding gums that don't resolve, persistent tooth sensitivity, visible gum recession, or loose teeth, please see your dentist, since these can indicate underlying issues that brushing technique alone won't resolve. Now let's begin. Most people ask, am I brushing my teeth correctly? But that's actually a difficult question to answer through self-reflection alone, because brushing has become such an automatic, unconscious habit that most people genuinely cannot describe their own technique accurately without watching themselves do it. The better question is, what are the specific technique mistakes that tend to become more consequential after 50? And do any of these patterns match habits I've likely had since childhood without ever reconsidering them? Because the honest truth is that many people learned their brushing habits decades ago, sometimes from a parent's example rather than professional instruction, and those habits, whatever their origin, have simply continued unchanged and unexamined for most of a lifetime. Here is why this matters so much more after 50 specifically. Gum tissue naturally becomes somewhat thinner and less resilient with age, meaning a brushing technique involving excessive pressure or an overly aggressive scrubbing motion, which may have caused no noticeable harm to firmer, younger gum tissue, can begin contributing to visible gum recession and increased sensitivity once that tissue has thinned. Enamel, the hard outer layer protecting your teeth, gradually wears thinner over decades of use, meaning the same brushing pressure that felt perfectly fine for years can begin to accelerate enamel, where once that protective layer has already been naturally thinned by age. Additionally, many adults over 50 experience some degree of naturally occurring dry mouth, whether due to certain medications, natural changes in salivary gland function, or other factors, and saliva plays a genuinely protective role in your mouth that becomes more important to support through technique once its natural volume has decreased somewhat. Think of your gums and enamel like a pair of well-worn hiking boots that have carried you comfortably for decades. In their early years, those boots could handle rough terrain, careless scuffing against rocks, and generally imprecise footing without much consequence, since the leather and soles were still thick, sturdy, and forgiving. But after years of wear, that same leather has thinned in places, the tread has worn down, and the same careless scuffing that caused no issue years ago now wears through more quickly, exposing weaker material underneath. Your gums and enamel follow a remarkably similar pattern. The same brushing habits that seem to cause no visible problem for decades can begin producing genuine, measurable where once the underlying tissue has naturally thinned with age, which is exactly why technique deserves a fresh look at this stage of life, even if your habits have felt perfectly fine for as long as you can remember. Let's start with the first and most common mistake: brushing with excessive pressure. Many people equate a thorough, effective brushing session with firm, vigorous scrubbing, believing that more pressure removes more plaque and produces a cleaner result. In reality, dental research consistently shows that gentle, controlled brushing removes plaque just as effectively as aggressive scrubbing, since plaque is a soft, easily disturbed film rather than a hardened substance requiring significant force to dislodge. Excessive pressure, particularly combined with a firm bristled toothbrush, can wear away enamel over time and contribute directly to gum recession, exposing the more sensitive root surface of your teeth beneath the gum line. This mistake often goes unnoticed for years or even decades, precisely because the damage accumulates so gradually that it's rarely connected back to brushing technique specifically, until a dentist eventually points out visible recession or root sensitivity during a routine checkup. The fix involves consciously reducing the pressure applied during brushing, ideally light enough that you could comfortably use the same pressure on the delicate skin of your inner wrist without discomfort, and switching to a soft bristled toothbrush if you're currently using a medium or firm bristle option. The second common mistake involves an aggressive horizontal scrubbing motion, moving the brush rapidly back and forth in long horizontal strokes across multiple teeth at once, rather than smaller, more controlled movements. This horizontal scrubbing motion concentrates repetitive friction directly along the gum line and at the base of the tooth near the gum, an area already more vulnerable after 50 due to the natural thinning of gum tissue discussed earlier. Over years, this repeated horizontal friction can contribute to a specific pattern of wear called abrasion, sometimes visible as small notches or grooves near the gum line on the affected teeth, alongside contributing to gum recession in that same area. The fix involves using small, gentle circular motions or short, gentle strokes angled slightly toward the gum line, rather than long horizontal scrubbing motions that concentrate friction and pressure in one particular pattern across your teeth. The third common mistake involves brushing immediately after consuming acidic foods or beverages, such as coffee, citrus fruits, or wine, without waiting an adequate amount of time first. Acidic foods and drinks temporarily soften the outer layer of your enamel, and brushing immediately during this softened state can actually brush away a small amount of that temporarily weakened enamel, contributing to gradual enamel thinning over time with repeated exposure to this pattern. This mistake has become somewhat more common with widespread information about oral hygiene emphasizing brushing after every meal, without equally widespread awareness of this specific acid-related timing consideration. The fix involves waiting approximately 30 minutes after consuming something acidic before brushing, allowing your saliva time to naturally neutralize the acidity and allow your enamel to reharden somewhat, rather than brushing immediately while the enamel is in a temporarily softened state. The fourth common mistake involves neglecting the gum line itself, focusing brushing primarily on the visible, flat surfaces of the teeth while giving less attention to the area directly where the tooth meets the gum. This is precisely the area where plaque tends to accumulate most readily and where gum disease typically begins, meaning insufficient attention to this specific zone allows plaque buildup to persist and irritate the gum tissue over time, contributing to the gradual progression of gum disease that becomes considerably more common after 50. The fix involves consciously angling your toothbrush at roughly a 45-degree angle toward the gum line, allowing the bristles to gently reach just beneath the edge of the gum tissue, rather than brushing in a way that primarily addresses only the flat, visible surface of each tooth. The fifth common mistake involves an inadequate brushing duration, often rushing through the process in 30 seconds or less, rather than the full 2 minutes generally recommended by dental professionals. Many people significantly underestimate how much time they actually spend brushing, often believing they've brushed for a full 2 minutes when in reality, without timing themselves, the actual duration is considerably shorter. This matters because thorough plaque removal across all surfaces of your teeth genuinely requires adequate time, and rushing through the process tends to result in certain areas, often the back teeth or the inner surfaces facing your tongue, receiving significantly less attention than the more easily accessible front surfaces. The fix involves using a timer, whether a simple kitchen timer, a phone timer, or many electric toothbrushes that include a built-in 2-minute timer feature, to ensure you're actually brushing for the full recommended duration rather than relying on your own internal sense of time, which tends to underestimate how quickly a rushed brushing session actually passes. The sixth common mistake involves neglecting your tongue during your brushing routine, an area that plays a meaningfully larger role in oral health, and particularly bad breath, than many people realize. Bacteria accumulate readily on the surface of your tongue, particularly toward the back, and this bacterial buildup contributes significantly to bad breath and can also contribute to the overall bacterial load in your mouth that affects gum health more broadly. Many people brush their teeth thoroughly while giving little to no attention to their tongue, missing an opportunity to meaningfully improve both breath freshness and overall oral bacterial balance with a very simple addition to their existing routine. The fix involves gently brushing your tongue, or using a dedicated tongue scraper if you prefer, working from the back of the tongue toward the front, as part of your regular brushing routine, rather than treating tongue cleaning as optional or unnecessary. The seventh common mistake involves replacing your toothbrush too infrequently, continuing to use a toothbrush with visibly frayed, splayed bristles well past the point where it can effectively clean your teeth. Worn, frayed bristles lose much of their ability to reach into the small crevices and along the gum line where effective cleaning matters most, meaning a worn-out toothbrush provides considerably less effective plaque removal than a fresh one, even if you're using otherwise excellent technique in every other respect. Dental professionals generally recommend replacing your toothbrush, or the head of an electric toothbrush, every 3 to 4 months, or sooner if you notice visible fraying before that time frame. This mistake is easy to overlook simply because toothbrush wear happens so gradually that it's difficult to notice the decline in effectiveness without consciously comparing your current toothbrush to a brand new one. Now let's talk about the eighth and final common mistake, which involves not flossing consistently, or flossing in a way that's more damaging than helpful. Many adults have inconsistent flossing habits, sometimes flossing diligently for a period after a dental appointment before gradually letting the habit slide, and among those who do floss regularly, some use an overly aggressive, snapping motion that can actually injure the delicate gum tissue between teeth, an area that becomes more vulnerable to injury as gum tissue naturally thins with age. Flossing reaches areas between teeth that a toothbrush simply cannot access effectively, regardless of how good your brushing technique is otherwise, meaning inconsistent or aggressive flossing leaves a genuine gap in your overall oral hygiene routine that brushing alone cannot fill. The fix involves flossing once daily, ideally in the evening, using a gentle, controlled motion, guiding the floss carefully between each tooth and curving it against the side of each tooth in a gentle C-shape, rather than snapping it forcefully between teeth or sawing aggressively back and forth. Now, before we go further, let's debunk a few common myths about brushing technique specifically. For years, many people believed that harder brushing and a firmer toothbrush produce a more thorough, effective clean than gentler technique. Some believed that brushing immediately after every meal, regardless of what was eaten, is always the ideal practice without exception. Some believed that as long as visible plaque or food debris is removed, the specific technique used doesn't matter much beyond that basic goal. And some believed that toothbrush replacement timing is a minor, largely unimportant detail compared to the act of brushing itself. But when we look at the actual mechanisms involved in gum health and enamel preservation, the picture becomes considerably more nuanced. The real questions are not simply, does my mouth feel clean afterward, or have I always brushed this particular way without any obvious problem? The better questions are, am I using gentle, controlled pressure rather than aggressive scrubbing? Am I angling my brush toward the gum line specifically, rather than only addressing the flat surfaces of my teeth? Am I waiting an appropriate amount of time after acidic foods before brushing? Am I actually brushing for the full recommended duration, rather than a rushed, shortened version? And is my toothbrush still genuinely effective, or has it quietly become worn past the point of real usefulness? A mouth that feels clean in the moment doesn't necessarily mean the underlying technique is protecting your gums and enamel effectively over the coming years and decades. Now let's build a simple, practical framework for correcting your brushing technique starting with your very next session. First, switch to a soft-bristled toothbrush if you're not already using one, and consciously reduce your brushing pressure to a genuinely gentle level. Second, use small, gentle circular motions rather than long, horizontal scrubbing strokes. Third, angle your brush at roughly 45 degrees toward the gum line, ensuring this often neglected area receives adequate, gentle attention. Fourth, wait approximately 30 minutes after consuming acidic foods or beverages before brushing. Fifth, time your brushing sessions to ensure you're reaching the full 2 minutes generally recommended, rather than relying on your own sense of elapsed time. Sixth, include your tongue in your regular routine, gently brushing or scraping from back to front. Seventh, replace your toothbrush, or your electric toothbrush head, every 3 to 4 months, or sooner if you notice visible fraying. Eighth, floss once daily using a gentle, controlled motion rather than an aggressive snapping or sawing technique. Let's talk a bit more about electric toothbrushes specifically, since many adults over 50 wonder whether switching from a manual toothbrush would meaningfully improve their technique and outcomes. Many electric toothbrushes include built-in pressure sensors that alert you, often through a light or a change in vibration pattern, when you're applying too much pressure during brushing, directly addressing one of the most common mistakes discussed today without requiring you to consciously monitor your own pressure throughout the entire brushing session. Additionally, the built-in timers on most electric models help address the duration mistake automatically, typically dividing the 2-minute session into 30-second segments for each quadrant of your mouth, helping ensure more even attention across all areas rather than unconsciously favoring easier-to-reach surfaces. This doesn't mean a manual toothbrush can't be used effectively, since proper technique with a manual brush, applied consciously and consistently, can achieve very similar results, but for anyone who finds it genuinely difficult to monitor their own pressure and timing consistently, an electric toothbrush with these built-in features can provide helpful, automatic support for several of the specific mistakes covered today. It's also worth addressing the specific concern of tooth sensitivity, which becomes considerably more common after 50, often as a direct consequence of some of the gum recession and enamel thinning discussed throughout this video. If you're currently experiencing sensitivity to hot, cold, or sweet foods, a toothpaste specifically formulated for sensitive teeth, used consistently over several weeks, can often meaningfully reduce this discomfort by gradually helping to block the microscopic channels in exposed dentin that transmit these sensations. However, persistent or worsening sensitivity is also worth mentioning to your dentist directly, since it can occasionally indicate an underlying issue, such as a cracked tooth or more significant decay, that requires professional evaluation rather than management through toothpaste alone. Let's talk a bit more about dry mouth specifically, since this connects directly back to several of the mistakes already discussed and becomes considerably more relevant after 50. Saliva plays a genuinely protective role in your mouth, helping to naturally rinse away food particles and bacteria throughout the day, neutralizing acids produced by oral bacteria, and providing minerals that help naturally reharden enamel after acid exposure. Many common medications taken more frequently after 50, including certain blood pressure medications, antihistamines, and antidepressants, list dry mouth as a common side effect, meaning many adults over 50 are managing reduced saliva production without necessarily connecting it to their medication regimen. Reduced saliva means your mouth has less natural protection against the very issues discussed throughout this video, including plaque accumulation and enamel vulnerability to acid, making thoughtful brushing technique even more important as a substitute for some of that naturally reduced protective function. If you suspect dry mouth may be affecting you, whether from noticing a persistently dry or sticky feeling in your mouth, particularly upon waking, mentioning this specifically to your dentist or doctor can help identify whether a medication adjustment, a saliva substitute product, or simply increased water intake throughout the day might provide meaningful relief. It's also worth addressing dental work specifically, since many adults over 50 have crowns, fillings, bridges, or dental implants that weren't necessarily part of their mouth in earlier decades, and these restorations sometimes require slightly different considerations than natural tooth surfaces. The margin where a crown or filling meets your natural tooth can sometimes be a particular area of vulnerability for plaque accumulation, meaning the gentle, gumline-focused technique discussed earlier becomes especially relevant around these specific restorations. Dental implants, meanwhile, require diligent cleaning around the base where the implant meets the gum tissue, since the tissue surrounding an implant can be particularly susceptible to a condition similar to gum disease if plaque is allowed to accumulate in this area consistently. If you have any dental restorations, asking your dentist directly whether any modification to your general technique would specifically benefit those particular areas can provide valuable, personalized guidance beyond the general recommendations covered today. Let's also briefly touch on nutrition's supporting role in oral health, since diet works alongside brushing technique, rather than as a separate, unrelated consideration. Adequate calcium and vitamin D intake support the health of your jawbone, which anchors your teeth, and adequate vitamin C supports gum tissue health specifically, since vitamin C plays a role in collagen production, a key structural component of healthy gum tissue. This doesn't mean nutrition alone can compensate for poor brushing technique, but rather that these nutritional factors work alongside good technique to support your overall oral health, particularly relevant after 50 when both bone density and collagen production naturally decline somewhat with age. Without any visible gum recession, sensitivity, or dental issues at their regular checkups. If your dentist has consistently reported healthy gums and no concerning enamel wear at your regular checkups, your current technique may simply be working well for your individual mouth, and there's no need to feel alarmed or assume you must be doing significant damage simply based on general statistics about common mistakes. The considerations discussed today are most relevant for anyone already experiencing some degree of sensitivity, visible recession, or specific feedback from their dentist suggesting a technique adjustment would be beneficial, rather than a universal warning that applies with equal urgency to every single person regardless of their individual dental health and their dentist's direct observations. And what about people who have recognized several of these mistakes in their own routine but find it genuinely difficult to change a habit that's felt automatic for decades? Changing any deeply ingrained habit takes conscious, repeated practice, and brushing technique is no exception. A practical approach involves focusing on just one or two specific adjustments at a time, such as simply reducing pressure and switching to circular motions for the first week or two, before adding attention to the gumline angle or tongue cleaning in subsequent weeks. Placing a small visual reminder, such as a sticky note near your toothbrush, or setting a phone reminder during the first few weeks of adjusting your technique, can help reinforce the new pattern until it becomes as automatic as your previous, less effective technique once was. Let's also briefly mention the value of asking your dentist or dental hygienist to directly observe and comment on your specific brushing technique during your next regular appointment, since this provides considerably more personalized, precise feedback than general guidance alone. Many dental hygienists are genuinely happy to demonstrate proper technique directly in the chair, pointing out specific areas where your particular habits might benefit from adjustment, information that's considerably more tailored and actionable than any general video, including this one, can provide. Now let's summarize everything in a simple way. Many common brushing mistakes become considerably more consequential after 50, including excessive brushing pressure, an aggressive horizontal scrubbing motion, brushing too soon after acidic foods, neglecting the gum line specifically, brushing for an inadequate duration, overlooking tongue cleaning, using a worn-out toothbrush past its effective lifespan, and inconsistent or overly aggressive flossing. None of these mistakes are unique to older adults, but the natural thinning of gum tissue and enamel that occurs with age means these same habits, which may have caused little visible harm in earlier decades, can begin producing genuine, measurable consequences once your mouth has undergone these natural age-related changes. Correcting these habits doesn't require an entirely new, complicated routine, simply thoughtful adjustments to pressure, motion, timing, and consistency, applied to the same twice-daily routine you've likely maintained your entire life. But remember, the goal here isn't to feel alarmed about decades of past habits, but rather to recognize that your mouth today genuinely benefits from a fresh look at technique, regardless of how automatic and unchanged your routine has felt for as long as you can remember. Small, thoughtful adjustments made consistently from today forward can meaningfully support healthier gums and enamel for the years and decades still ahead. So with your very next brushing session, don't try to overhaul everything at once. Choose one adjustment to focus on first, whether it's simply softening your pressure, switching to gentler circular motions, or finally giving your tongue the attention it's likely been missing. Practice that single change consistently for the next week or two, then gradually add another adjustment from today's list as the previous one starts to feel more natural. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 8 mistakes did you recognize in your own brushing routine, and has your dentist ever specifically commented on your technique during a checkup? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help someone else watching this video reconsider a habit they've likely never questioned before. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe to Nutri, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more simple, practical health strategies for adults over 50. And next, watch our video on why most people over 60 walk the wrong way, and how to fix it today, because small, overlooked habits like these, whether in how you brush or how you walk, quietly shape your health and comfort for years longer than most people realize.